Okay, so here's a thought. What if a small Balkan nation, one maybe we don't think about all that often, holds genetic secrets, secrets older than the Roman Empire? Seriously, what if this tiny population actually carries perhaps the closest living genetic link to Europe's very first inhabitants? We're talking about Albania, often seen as, well, a bit of a riddle, right? A place of remarkable genetic continuity and definitely a focus of some fascinating scientific debate. So for this deep dive, we're going to really try and unpack pretty compelling collection research. We've got a stack of sources here, cutting-edge genetic studies, historical accounts, detailed linguistic analyses, the works. Our mission really is to understand why Albanian DNA is so incredibly unique. What are its connections, its deep connections to ancient European peoples? And maybe what does that reveal about our broader understanding of identity and, well, history itself?
It really is astonishing. Researchers have been, I'd say, genuinely surprised by the level of genetic isolation and distinctiveness they found in Albanians. You have to think, while many other European populations saw these huge waves of mixing migrations, wars, colonization over thousands of years, Albanian DNA shows this exceptional degree of continuity. It's quite something. Some elements trace directly back to Neolithic Balkan tribes, maybe even further back, to the earliest hunter-gatherers. It's almost like their gene pool has been remarkably preserved. It gives us this unparalleled window into early European history.
Okay, so let's really dig into that, the genetic blueprint you mentioned. What have studies actually revealed about the unique makeup of, say, Albanian Y DNA? And what does such a high concentration tell us about how their ancestors moved, or maybe how they didn't move?
Yeah, that's where it gets really specific and frankly pretty interesting. Genetic studies have found that an astonishingly high percentage, we're talking over 76% of Albanian male Y DNA, belongs to this one haplogroup, EV13. Now, just for context, Y DNA traces the direct paternal lineage, father to son, father to son. So it's a very clear, unbroken line back through history. And EV13 itself, it's ancient. It's thought to have originated and really expanded right there in the Balkans, maybe over 9,000 years ago, during the Neolithic period, when farming was spreading across Europe.
76%. Wow. That sounds incredibly high. How does that actually compare to the populations nearby?
Oh, it's dramatically different. It really stands out. If you look at neighboring populations, say Greeks or Italians, their genetic signatures are far more mixed. That reflects centuries of, empire building, trade routes, vast migrations, all that stuff. So, for instance, that EV13 frequency, 76% in Albanian males.
Yeah.
It's only around maybe 19% in Greece, about 10% in Italy, and it drops way down, less than 5% once you get to Western Europe. So this high frequency in Albania, it's not just some random blip. It really speaks to a significant long-term local continuity. They seem to have resisted external genetic influences more effectively than most other places in Europe. It suggests while other populations were genetically, let's say, stirred up, Albania remained relatively, undisturbed.
Undisturbed. And it's not just the Y DNA, right? You mentioned other types. What about the autosomal DNA? That gives us a broader view, doesn't it?
Exactly. Yeah, Y DNA is just one piece of the puzzle. Autosomal DNA, that's the genetic material you inherit from both parents. It paints a much more comprehensive picture. It shows the ancestral mixing over many generations. And there was a significant study, I think it was 2019, in Nature. It traced Albania's autosomal DNA back to those same early European Neolithic farmers we talked about. What they found was a remarkably low genetic impact from later major migrations. Things like the Indo-European expansions that really reshaped much of Europe's genetic landscape. Compared to other European nations, the impact was much lower in Albania. This means the Albanian gene pool is genuinely one of the most homogeneous in Europe, particularly in those, geographically isolated mountain regions, places like Geocaster and Triple J, where something called genetic drift likely played a big role.
Genetic drift. Okay, that sounds interesting. What exactly does that mean in this context? Is it like genes just drifting away?
Not quite drifting away, but it's related to randomness. Genetic drift is simply the random fluctuation of gene variants within a population just by chance over generations, and it has a much bigger effect in small, isolated communities. So in Albania's case, those remote, rugged mountain areas, they basically acted like natural fortresses. They limited interaction with outsiders, protected the gene flow or lack thereof. This geographic isolation created the perfect conditions where the genetic traits of the original inhabitants were preserved, almost like a bottleneck effect, allowing those ancient markers to stick around at high frequencies. It's a really powerful example of how geography can literally shape human history right down to the genetic level.
Wow. It really sounds like a kind of genetic fingerprint of resilience then. But the story isn't just in the blood, is it? What about the language? Because I've heard the Albanian language is also quite unique, an anomaly.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, this isn't just a genetic story. It's strongly echoed in their language. And that's another really critical piece of this whole puzzle. The Albanian language itself is definitely one of the oldest living languages in Europe. It's an Indo-European tongue, sure, but, and this is crucial, it stands completely alone on its own unique branch. It's not derived from Latin or Slavic or Germanic roots, unlike pretty much every other major European language you can think of.
So wait, it didn't evolve from Latin like, say, French or Spanish?
Yep.
Or from Germanic like English or German?
Precisely. No. And this linguistic isolation, it's a huge clue. Linguists have found ancient vocabulary, unique phonetic shifts within Albanian, things that just haven't followed the patterns of its neighbors. This strongly suggests an unbroken lineage from a much older indigenous European tongue. The prevailing theory is that it's a direct descendant of the ancient Illyrian language, spoken right there in that region thousands of years ago. So this remarkable linguistic continuity, when you put it alongside the genetic findings, it paints this vivid picture of a deeply rooted identity. Something pre-Roman, pre-Christian European that managed to survive largely intact.
Okay, the Illyrian link.
Yeah.
That keeps coming up, doesn't it? We've seen it mentioned in our sources as a recurring theme, but also, as you say, something that sparks academic debate. So how do the genetic and linguistic pieces kind of fit together to inform that historical discussion about the Illyrians?
That's a really important point, and yeah, it is debated. For centuries, historians have discussed the origins of Albanians and their connection to the ancient Illyrians, those tribal societies known for, well, fiercely resisting Roman conquest. The debate often stems from the fact that we have very few written Illyrian records, and population movements over millennia are just incredibly complex to track. However, the genetic evidence we've just been talking about, especially that high EV13 frequency and the specific patterns in the autosomal DNA, it provides pretty compelling support for a substantial and enduring Illyrian contribution to the modern Albanian gene pool. Then you combine that with the unique isolated branch of the Albanian language, which, as I said, many linguists hypothesize is a direct descendant of Illyrian, and you have a strong case. It's still actively researched, of course, but it's a strong argument for significant ancestral continuity in that region. So while some historians might lean towards more complex theories, maybe involving multiple migrations layering on top, the sheer weight of both genetic and linguistic evidence makes that Illyrian connection look incredibly robust. It really suggests that despite all the empires, all the migrations sweeping through the Balkans, a core population linked to those ancient inhabitants managed to persist in those territories.
It really paints a picture, doesn't it, of people who are somehow able to maintain this distinct identity. And maybe it comes back to that geographic isolation you mentioned. The rugged mountains, it seems like the landscape itself could have played a huge role in preserving this ancient heritage.
Absolutely. I think that's key. The mountainous terrain of Albania, it isn't just scenic, it's acted as a historical sanctuary. It made it harder for invaders to access and control everything. It probably facilitated the survival of smaller, more self-contained communities, and that, in turn, protected their distinct genetic profiles and their unique linguistic traits. The fact that we find the highest genetic homogeneity, the least amount of mixing, in precisely these very isolated mountain regions that strongly reinforces the point. It's a compelling example of geography and human resilience just intertwining over centuries, over millennia. So yeah, stepping back and kind of connecting all these threads, what we've explored today really does suggest that Albania functions as this remarkable genetic time capsule. It's not just that it's distinct, it offers unique, tangible data points about Europe's ancient past, about the original patterns of settlement and maybe the limits of later population movements.
That is a profound thought, a genetic time capsule. So thinking about that, what does this all mean for you listening right now? Given that even ancient populations were, constantly on the move, mixing to some degree, what does it truly mean to be genetically European anyway, in the grand scheme of history?
It makes you wonder if Albanians have managed to preserve such ancient DNA and these deep linguistic roots. What else might have survived alongside those traits? Could it be cultural lessons, enduring traditions, maybe a particular worldview, or perhaps even that spirit of independence, of resistance that seems to echo through their history? It prompts reflection on those invisible threads connecting past and present.
We've also seen, though, where this kind of research can get politically charged sometimes, which prompts us to ask, should countries use genetics to build national identity? Or should our focus really be more on our shared humanity, regardless of these deeper genetic histories? It's a tricky balance. Albania's gene pool isn't just special, It seems like it's a story frozen in the very rocks of the Balkans, something whispered in an ancient language and encoded deep in the DNA of a people who've watched empires come and go, yet somehow remain distinctly themselves. So what do you think? Do you believe Albania holds Europe's oldest genetic roots? And maybe more broadly, what stands out to you about how genetic evidence might, or maybe even should, play a role in shaping national identity today?